Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I must expand my language base. I really must. You'd think I'd remember that from Italy and France, but no, never mind. Some announcements. You have your notices in front of you. Please have a really good read of those. Some just to quickly pick out. What have I got? Next week you've got me. And you've got me again the week after because of that thing called Easter. So how's this? You got me 3 weeks in a row. Hey. And so the Easter times and what we are doing should also be in there, which is our Holy Week reflections as well as Good Friday, 3 services on Easter Sunday, and then I'm sleeping. High Street times are available, so make sure you grab your copy out there. Or grab a copy of someone that isn't here and you know you are going to see. It's a little interesting being long weekend, who's here and who's not here. Now, we need some help this morning with morning tea. Some of you may have seen the emails that went around. Howard's actually gone to the hospital because I think he's broken a rib. And he was being a typical man and didn't want to go to the hospital. So that's why they're not here. So if people can just help with the morning tea as we get there, that would be really great. Reminder that Chaos is on next Saturday night at the Lakes. Please see the Lakes for more details. I think there are details in the notices if I remember correctly. Yep. Just not an address? Okay. So you can go and see Tim and Mandy for an address. Fruit salad is on this Friday. Coming, we're not 100% sure what we're doing yet. We got sidetracked with movies a couple of weeks ago because they didn't have any G-rated movies that were worth seeing. So we'll see. So I'll be in contact. I'm looking to see what movies come out. I may have to wait till Tuesday to find that out, but we will see. Is there anything else I have for...
There's a special concert next Sunday afternoon.
There is a special concert next Sunday afternoon, you are right. Next week we have baptism. Little Lily, who's 10, will be being baptised. And the other thing we have next week, which is really good, is a liturgy to celebrate the commencement of Julie's period of discernment. For those of you who don't know what a period of discernment is, it's within the church. It's a time when you sit down and say, okay, God, help me. Where do you want me to go? You do that in association with a mentor. And it's done through the presbytery. So Julie's come to that place where she thinks she needs some sitting down with God time. Would that be about right? Yeah, okay. So we're going to formalise that. So we will actually do a liturgy next week to mark the beginning of that as well. Anything else? No. Excellent. Good. All yours. Oh, I do need to say, sorry, Liam, an exceedingly big thank you to Rachel and Liam for today's service. Rachel's really gone out on a limb, given us, I'm hoping, what's going to be some great connections, experiences, and knowledge. So, and I know this is something that's really close to her heart. So thank you for taking the challenge to do that. And we look forward to you all leading us through.
Good morning. Definitely a good thanks to Rachel. I didn't have any part in preparation today. In fact, I find it too close to home to... okay. Let's join together in our call to worship. This is a responsive factor, so if you join in with the together, we've got it up there, we bring you our praise. Come, let us worship our God. God who holds the vast distances of the universe, God who knows when a sparrow falls, God of the ancient, of the contemporary and yet to be, life-giving and sustaining God, together we bring you our praise. Creator of heaven and earth, making us in your image, we give you praise. Saviour and servant, renewing us in your image, we give you praise. Counsellor and Comforter, upholding us in your image, we give you praise. Amen. And if I say to you, the peace of the Lord be with you, you say?
And also you.
Let's take the time to pass this between ourselves personally.
So the song we're going to sing now, I don't think we've sung for a while. It's called Stop Still and Listen. Describes creation. There is a couple of bars in each verse. It says things like listen to the surf, and then there's a bar paused, and the instructions in the song say for you to add the sound effects. So when we have surfing, or the surf, the owls, the wind, we need some sound effects after each listen to the surf. Okay. How's your eyesight? muddling through with some of our songs today because I have picked a few that are probably a bit less familiar. It says in the order of service now, climate change. What's the problem? What are we doing about it? I'm going to need some helpers for this. So first of all, I need someone to be the earth. Who wants to be the earth? Yes, come and be the earth. Okay. I also need someone to be the sun. Do you want to wear the red cloth as well?
Oh, my hair.
Okay. All right, so Earth in the middle here. Actually, I mean, we probably should really have the sun in the middle and the Earth goes around it, but we try and think of ourselves in the middle, don't we? All right, so the sun is going to send some energy to the Earth. Do you want to hold your energy out of the sun? Thank you. And the Earth, if it didn't have any atmosphere and was just, it would be heating up from the energy from the sun, and it would start to send some energy out into space as well. And if it didn't have an atmosphere, the temperature of our Earth would be about minus 15 degrees. Pretty cold, not very habitable. But we do have an atmosphere, and the atmosphere is like a blanket. You think you can manage to hold the Earth and wear a blanket? No. Aidan, can you maybe come and be the atmosphere and hold the blanket for us? You think you can do it? Okay. All right, so the atmosphere is made up of a lot of different gases, nitrogen, oxygen, but a few of those, Aidan, you're going to come and help. All right. And particularly a few of the gases in the atmosphere, water vapour, carbon dioxide, they actually trap some of the heat. And now we're up to plus 15 degrees on average. Good temperature for living at. Everyone agree? But what's the problem now? We're kind of getting out of balance. So I think we've got one slide here. Yes. Since we started to get the Industrial Revolution and stuff, we started to burn energy, and we've put extra carbon dioxide, particularly into the atmosphere. And now it's like we're putting a second blanket on the Earth. We're trapping more heat, and we're getting even warmer. So if you look up here, it goes backwards in time. So it's going back 400,000 years. You've got a wiggly line where carbon dioxide was always only around, well, less than, say, 280 parts per million. So it's not very much of it in the atmosphere. Only 280 out of every million atmosphere gases is carbon dioxide. But then you see on the right-hand side, from about particularly 1950, it just goes way off the graph. And you can see now we're up at something around 400, and we're really going into territory that the world hasn't seen in the last 400,000 years. Now you might wonder, how do we even know what the CO2 concentration was in the atmosphere 400,000 years ago? And where we find this out is they drill ice cores in Antarctica. And as the snow has grown over those thousands of years, little air bubbles have been trapped in that gas, in that ice. And they actually sort of slice off these ice cores. We do some of this at the lab where I am at CSIRO, at least at the moment. And they measure the gas in those tiny bubbles of air, and that's how we know what's been happening over those 400,000 years. And the ups and downs of the ice ages, but you can see as we come into the industrial last 100 years or so, we're just going off the scale. So how warm could we get? Well, it depends how much we keep putting in, but anything, we've already warmed about 1 degree globally since over the last 100 years. Going out to the end of this century, we could be anywhere between 2 and 6 degrees warmer, depending on the choices we make about how much carbon we keep putting into the atmosphere. So the next thing we're going to look at is, well, who's putting in the carbon dioxide? So the Earth and the Sun, you can probably sit down for now. You can undress too. got a map of the world here. And we're going to, so as I said, we're putting this extra carbon dioxide into the atmosphere mostly from our energy use, burning coal and gas and oil. But how much do we put in compared to other countries? So, who wants to be Australia?
I want to be Australia.
Okay, Australia. So, we're measuring our carbon, how much carbon we put in M&Ms. So you need to put it down on Australia. You know where Australia is on the map, down here. Each M&M is worth 50 kilograms of carbon per person in Australia. And we've got 88 M&Ms in our tub. How many do you think the Americans are going to put out per person? Now, we discussed this over tea last night, so Alicia's not allowed to answer. I need a suggestion from someone else. Compared to 88 for Australia? Well, actually it's pretty much the same. These are 2011, which is the latest data available. So we've got 90 for America. So, Aidan, do you know where America is on the map? I'm going to come and find it. Over in green. They've got a... It's the United States, so it's up here.
United States. UNITE.
Okay, so we'll think about England now as maybe sort of more typical of Europe. Guesses for England? You can put it down, Alicia, but who's going to guess for how many M&Ms for England?
60.
Sorry?
60.
Bit less than 60? Yes?
50.
Bit less than 50?
45.
Less than 45?
30.
39. Okay, so probably use more gas than coal than we do, because coal is dirtier than gas in terms of carbon. And they're smaller countries, so they're not sort of covering the same distances that we are. So China is one of our growing economies. They have a lot of people too. They're actually, in terms of total emissions, they're kind of up there now amongst the top countries. But how many do you think per person?
30.
Close? 36. Okay, you know where China is on the map? Now I thought we'd move over to some of our Lent event places we've been talking about over the last few weeks. So, week 1 of Lent event, have we got... Can we go back to the slides? Yes? Okay. Week 1 of Lent event was Zimbabwe. Guesses for Zimbabwe?
6.
Close. 4. So Zimbabwe, you're looking Africa, yellow. Down. Okay, next country. We had Sri Lanka, where we were thinking about the kids who were education for disabled kids. Sri Lanka, guesses? 10, 4 as well, actually. So Sri Lanka near India, in pink. Yeah. Then we talked about the women in the Pacific. So in the video, there was a particular woman from Vanuatu talking. Close, even, less? Yes?
2.
How many?
3.
3. So that's Vanuatu down here. Okay, last week I don't think we did Lent event in the service, but it was South Sudan supporting the training of midwives, yes? 2, down to 2 in South Sudan. Certainly one of the poorer countries in the world. Africa, or sort of northern Africa. Okay, and finally this week, looking at a clinic for HIV sufferers in West Papua. So we know that West Papua is the other half of the with Papua New Guinea, just north of us, actually part of Indonesia. Maybe a bit controversial that, but so what I've got here, I've got both the Indonesian one and the PNG one, because I thought Papua New Guinea emissions might actually be more typical of West Papua. So guesses for Indonesia? 13. Guesses for Papua New Guinea? 4. So the blue ones, yellow is the... So what kids particularly, what do you notice about that map? Yeah, and are they, and is it sort of equal how we've covered it, or do you...
4, 2, 3, heaps.
Yeah, so do you think there's a problem that we're using heaps and lots of the world...
Except for the United States.
Yeah,
They're kind of equal with the United States.
so certainly per person in Australia, we're one of the biggest users of carbon. I think we get rid of the sun. So we're clearly not using the world's resources fairly. The developed world is responsible for changing the climate, but its impact is likely to be felt much more by the developing world, the world that can't afford to adapt, doesn't have the same capacity as us. If you're out in an island nation in the South Pacific, warming temperatures lead to increasing sea level. Some of them are going to be even worried about how much of their land do they have left at the end of this century. Did have one slide here which was just going to show a little bit about what's happening in the international sphere. So you may have heard that there was a meeting last December in Paris. Out of it came the Paris Agreement. This was some of the key things that were agreed at it. So the agreement was to try and keep global temperature increases well below 2 degrees C. That's a very ambitious target. It's great that the world has come together and said that. In fact, they even said we'd like to aim for 1.5 degrees. That was particularly pushed by some of the Pacific Island nations and other countries who feel particularly vulnerable. It's going to be challenging because this second plot, that sort of big donut, the blue bit is the carbon emissions we've already used in terms of what we estimate we can afford to use to get us, to keep us under 2 degrees. So we've actually got to cut back pretty severely over the next few decades. So all the countries, pretty much all the countries in the world, the ones coloured red in that top right map, before the meeting, they put in what they thought that they could do, what targets they were willing to aim for. So for Australia, we said we would try and reduce our carbon emissions to 26 to 28% below 2005 emissions by 2030. You can play with it in the next song, okay? So we put in our targets. I think they're generally thought to be a bit less ambitious than some of the comparable nations that we might compare ourselves with, Europe, Canada, even the USA. But at least it's a start. No country is actually legally mandated to meet their target, but what is agreed, and you probably can't see it, the writing's too blurry, but that every 5 years we will get together and see how people are going with their targets, and people can update their targets, but they're only allowed to strengthen them. They're not allowed to make them any weaker than they've made already. The targets at the moment aren't sufficient to get us to 2 degrees, so that's the kind of red line there in that sort of bottom right plot. The blue and green is where we actually need our emissions to go to 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. So really pretty much by the middle of the century, or the second half of the century, we need to be phasing out our use of carbon emissions altogether. And another part of the agreement that there would be financial assistance going from developed countries to developing countries to help them develop without taking the high carbon route that we have taken to do our development. So that was a little bit of background. We're going to sing now. It's an Iona song, Sing Praise to God. What's that? And we're going to sing it to Ode to Joy as a tune that at least will be familiar.
Passover, Jesus went to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, the man he had raised from death. They prepared a dinner for him there, which Martha helped to serve. Lazarus was one of those who were sitting at the table with Jesus. Then Mary took half a litre of very expensive perfume made of pure nard, poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. The sweet smell of the perfume filled the whole house. One of Jesus' disciples, Judas Iscariot, the one who was going to betray him, said, "Why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 silver coins and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He carried the money bag and would help himself from it. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Let her keep what she has for the day of my burial. You will always have poor people with you, but you will not always have me." This is the word of the Lord.
So our next song, I actually remember from my childhood. I'm pretty sure we used to sing it in school assembly, and it seemed to fit this reading so well that I couldn't really pass it by. So it said Judas to Mary. It's a Sydney Carter song.
So Judas to So those of you who were here last week, I warned you that this was our Bible reading, and I said to you, maybe your challenge for the week is to think about how that reading could be related to climate change. And I'll give you some of my thoughts, but if any of you did manage to have a think about that, then we would be pleased to share those. So that Bible reading we've heard, it's about a week before Jesus' death. And its main characters are Mary and Martha and Lazarus, who are sisters and brother. The Bible has two other interactions between these people and Jesus in other places. So you might remember they've got the time when Jesus goes to the home. Martha's in the kitchen. Mary's sitting at the feet of Jesus wanting to listen to what Jesus is saying. There's a bit of kind of, oh, shouldn't Mary be out helping with the food? And then we have that very significant story where Lazarus has died, and Mary and Martha, particularly I guess Martha is perhaps featured a bit more in that story, and her interactions with Jesus, and Jesus coming and raising Lazarus from the death. And this happens quite shortly afterwards. And here we've got Mary anointing Jesus' feet with some very expensive perfume. You know, some people say maybe a year's wages. Don't know where she got it from, whether it had been passed to her or whatever. And wiping Jesus' feet with her hair. And as Alicia said to me, oh, that's gross. It was probably quite scandalous. You know, you didn't sort of in those times let down your hair. And so we hear sort of Judas' perspective on it, that it's kind of scandalous because of the waste of this money, or what could be converted to money, but also from this kind of intimacy that Mary is showing Jesus in kind of public. So, to climate change. And I think that for me it's kind of thinking about, well, what do we value? You know, that perfume was very valuable. And what do we do with the things that we value? So, in that story, there's kind of three options given. There's, you know, that Mary poured out the perfume. She used it in a way that, in fact, Jesus kind of commends. Judas said, well, you could spend it or sell it, give the money to the poor. And then there's this kind of other commentary there which says, well, actually, Judas used to take money from the common purse, and there's kind of a bit of a sort of side issue there. But that made me think, well, when it comes to the earth, all that we've been given, kind of as a common resource, are we actually sort of stealing from that common purse in terms of our kind of ripping off of the poor part of the world? You know, we're clearly using more than our fair share. So I think the reading and obviously the issue of climate change should challenge us about the way we live. And is it possible for us to actually live sustainably? And I think it was the World Wildlife Fund website I looked at, and it said that if everyone on Earth lived like Australians, we'd actually need 3 or 4 Earths to support us. And so that's clearly not sustainable. But I also acknowledge that changing our way of life isn't at all easy. We're kind of part of an economic system that is very hard to escape. And I think what really brought this home to me was when we had the global financial crisis, and effectively we were all given some money by the government and told to go and spend it. You know, we don't really care how you spend it, just spend it, because consuming was the important thing. It was that thing that needed to be done to keep the economy going. And so all of our system is set up to consume, to grow. And to me, it doesn't make sense, but I don't know how we get out of it. It certainly kind of raises the question, well, how much do we need? You know, is there something to be said for this current trend to declutter? There was even a little cartoon in the paper just the other day about, you know, the woman who feels so good after she's decluttered her house that she has to go and get more junk to fill it up so she can feel good again. Or the TV shows that are advising us on how to clear out our storage units and things like that. I mean, the one that was on last night was pretty much saying we have collections of possessions that we don't really need. There's a lot of interconnected issues here. So, you know, Lent event is raising for us the needs of the developed world. People in poverty have less capacity to adapt when we have issues that are global, like climate change. And you get links too between poverty and disease and climate change. It's quite likely that warming world will make, you know, some mosquito-borne diseases become prevalent in places where they haven't been before, and makes everyone more vulnerable in that way. I read New Scientist, and there was an interesting article in there recently about the connection between slavery and carbon emissions, that still in parts of the world people are enslaved and they end up tending to be put onto projects that might be things like clearing mangroves, deforesting land, which are then also having the impacts on carbon emissions. And so this article was actually claiming or suggesting that if we could eliminate slavery worldwide, we might actually be doing some good things for our carbon emissions as well. So what should we do? I think there's certainly no simple solution. There's no single solution. We can clearly, I think, reduce our energy consumption, increase energy efficiency. You know, there's that little catchphrase, live simply that others may simply live. Maybe we need to be more selective in our purchases, own and use things that we really treasure, such as that perfume, and not just all the extra stuff that we seem to fill our houses with. We should certainly have, you know, the push to renewable energy. So, you know, it's clear that we're never going to sort of get to a place where we don't use energy, and, you know, it's quite right for the developing world to want to have more of the, you know, the lifestyle that we have. So if we're going to need energy, then at least we should be looking to solar and wind and wave energy to be doing that. And certainly studies have shown that Australia could meet all of its energy needs from renewables. We're in an ideal position with a large country, lots of coastline, lots of sunshine, lots of wind. And, you know, if we can't do it, how can we expect other parts of the world to do it? It's certainly useful to be informed. So something like the Climate Council is a good place to go to get some information about climate change. And I think we need to let our politicians know that this is something that we care about. And it was interesting that The Age this morning was reporting that Bill Shorten was saying he wants climate change to be an election issue, and we need to be, I guess, out there and making sure it is there as an election issue. So they were basically my thoughts, but I would be interested to know if anyone else sees different connections between that Bible reading and climate change, or even, I'm a bit afraid to actually opening up to questions, but I'm happy to. Yes.
There's a video that I've watched a number of times with students, and it's called The Story of Stuff. And it goes through a tweet, and it sort of really helps challenge the whole thing of that consumerism and where it comes from. So just encourage people to have a look at that as well. The Story of Stuff.
Yeah, so I guess my take-home message, why is climate change important as followers of Jesus? I think we are called to care for creation, and issues around habitat loss, diversity loss, species extinctions are important. And clearly there's a social justice element to this. You know, we've made the mess and we need to clean it up.
Questions? Solar energy. Can you make any suggestions as to why government won't pay very much for people who put solar power on? Solar power.
Well, I mean, clearly there's a big fossil fuel industry that has influence. Coal is still cheap. I mean, there are challenges with renewables that when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow, you don't get the energy. So how do you store it? And so really, you know, there is work that still needs to be done around how to store that energy so that we have supplies when we need it. You know, what they would call the base load, which at the moment, you know, yes, coal-fired power stations can supply that very easily. But clearly, you know, it's not a good way to go into the future. But yes, there's certainly a whole lot of politics around funding of renewables versus, you know, subsidies to the, you know, fossil fuel industry still, yeah.
Rachel,
Yes.
you're implementing here.
Yep.
You got it to the population head how much
Yes.
carbon you do with carbon dioxide. Is that relevant across, is it being, this being, like there's only 3 Vanuatu, but if we put our I'm trying to work out that's being, let's put the words down. No one's working your head, so you can't say them now. Is our population usage equivalent to, don't worry about it,
Well,
later on, I'll ask you later.
some people would argue that Australia has a small population.
Yes. What's the
So,
population
so overall,
population's a lot bigger.
our emissions aren't very significant. So even if we changed, it wouldn't make a huge difference to the global numbers. And yes, to an extent that's true, but there's that kind of moral imperative about why should we be consuming at this rate when other people aren't. And the other comment is that the atmosphere doesn't actually care where the carbon comes from. So I heard, you know, this is in relation to the mine in Queensland, the coal mine that's proposed, and some Queensland MP saying, oh, but it won't be our carbon emissions, it'll be India's carbon emissions. And it's kind of like, the atmosphere doesn't care. You put it in across India and 12 months later it'll be across the globe. So, you know, that's, yeah.
It's a bit of a loaded question, and it's a bit cynical. But it's all very well to sit here with generally socially conscious people who talk about this, and I think we understand. But the wider population, what do you think it's going to actually take for the wider population of politicians actually take this seriously? Yeah, do you think it's going to take, they talk about the tipping point where we're get to a point where there's a point of no return and we're creating too much emissions for the world to handle. Do you think we'll actually reach that point? Because at the moment, I think it's all very well to appeal to moral reasons to stop down our emissions, but at the end of the day, people are selfish and governments have their own self-interest. And
Yeah.
there's no police guard policing Australia, Europe and America to reduce their carbon emissions. So what incentive does the government have to reduce their carbon emissions?
So I think that's where we do have to put some hope in the fact that there was, you know, agreement was reached in Paris. However limited it is, at least people are now saying, we understand we've got to aim for 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. And I think the other thing is that you hope then that things like that will start to flow through into the business community, because they're people maybe who aren't, well, along with governments, planning on decades-long timescales, and they eventually, you know, they want certainty too about the way, you know, the directions that governments are going to take. Now, you know, for example, it may come up as an election issue. Are we going to try and do some kind of emissions trading scheme in Australia? Now, the whole carbon tax before got very politicised. It was really sad, in my opinion, when, you know, that got ditched. I think we should be out there saying, let's not be frightened about an emissions trading scheme. Ultimately, we've got to have a price on carbon because our economy works around money and how things are priced. And if it gets to the point where, you know, electricity from coal costs more than electricity from solar because it's got a carbon price on it, then hopefully that will change things. But you kind of got to work at, I guess, at all levels.
It already does. And the government, I think the government's doing a lot of things. It's legislated that the power stations have to offset the greenhouse gases, and so they have to buy certificates from production from renewable energies. That's not hydro,
Yeah, and some governments are more active than others.
Can I suggest people or business to take up those things? So there's a lot. The framework's already there to have the change in place. It's just people aren't taking the action. Can I suggest too that it's like in respect to what you were saying about preaching to the converted? There's truth in that. I think that it's the same way with a lot of social causes or social issues that need to be addressed. We have to be courageous as people who understand these issues. When we encounter people who we have to be honest about what we see and understand and share that with people. Down here, for example, the green is sort of considered like almost sacred. And people, the pub talk around the barbecue is always, it's always put into the too hard basket. That's why we don't talk about politics at Christmas dinner, because it gets too complicated. But amongst our family and people we respect and love and share our time with, either at work or whatever, we have to find intelligent, non-confrontational ways of being able to talk about these issues without making it, without sweeping it all under the carpet. Because some of this issue, the reality, I suppose the answer to your question is perhaps when the sea level rises another, say, 20 centimetres, 10 centimetres, which it has done in the last, 50, 60 years, a lot of Melbourne, around this area will be underwater. And maybe it'll take that. I think it's important that we have the courage of our convictions and non-confrontational ways to be able to talk about it. It's not easy. We sometimes find we lose friends.
There's a song, folk song, way back, that goes, "Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord?" It talks about distribution of a message, essentially. I guess at the beginning I said I didn't have any input to organisation of this service because it was too close to home. I guess most people here will be aware that Rachel works for CSIRO as a climate science, monitoring and modelling climate. We talk about the government doing things. I relate the government doing things to the way we handle Christian message and saying as long as we put a cross up on the top of our building, people will know we're there so they can come if they want to. And at the moment we're facing a situation where the government has turned around, they'll tell you it's the CSIRO management, but they appoint CSIRO management, has turned around and said climate scientists have got to go. We know the climate's bad, the question's answered, and the CEO says we want to develop mitigation to it. Well, the best mitigation we've got at the moment is telling people and also monitoring where things are and being able to say, well, it's still going up or it's coming down. They don't care. And I've been doing a lot of research outside of Rachel's side because Rachel's got enough problems on her own as it is. And one of the things that comes out more than anything is we want it resolved in a way that makes more money. Because we are still an economy, and the economy that is based around our country and the US and Britain and Europe is we need people to spend the money they get, and that needs to be spent on our stuff. So our stuff gets into your stuff, worn out, and the cycle starts all over again. And I think more than anything else, regardless of how we talk to each other about it, for goodness sake, and I mean that word, pray. Pray for a solution just for keeping the message out there. Because at the moment, looking at the world, talking about it as we do over tea time and everything else, it's every bit as important in its own vein as the message is to go and preach the gospel and baptise people in it. Because we don't have the ability without monitoring what's happening, about saying this is what's happening. If you like, that, as I read that scripture today, I pictured Jesus as CSIRO talking to his people and saying, look, we're always going to have this, but this is what you can do. And we now have a government that, despite what you hear about, is saying, put up a wall, folks. Don't let them keep talking about it, because if they keep talking about it, someone's going to wake up one day. And the lifestyle will have to change. And it needs, we said, what are we going to do? What's happening? I really totally agree with you, but it means a lifestyle change. Ultimately means we have to say our economy isn't this. Our economy is what we do to make our country work and live, and for the betterment of the globe itself. And that comes right back and trickles right back to number one, as individuals. Please pray about it. I have been through, in my working life, 2 retrenchment situations in other companies, and I know what it does to families. And I said to Rachel, look, we're just about to send our kids into high school and this and that, and everything else, and they say, 100 of you have got to go. Well, there's only 145 scientists there in climate. So what's it going to do? It's going to do big damage, ultimately. The rest of the world, scientists acknowledge that and have sent letters to the government. But the government says, but it wasn't our decision. It was the new CEOs, CSIRO, who appointed the new CSIRO, CEO. Well, yes, it was us, but we didn't make the decision. So,
okay, so we
can,
and we can pick that conversation up after in morning tea, because we're going to have some prayer time after this next song, and I really want to spend some time over those prayers. This song is a bit of a prayer as well. For the fruits of all creation, thanks be to God. For the fruits of all creation, thanks be to God. For His gifts to every nation, thanks be to God. For the flowering, sowing, reaping, silent growth while we are sleeping, future needs in earth's taking. Thanks be to God. In the just reward of labor, God's will is done. In the help we give our neighbor, God's will is done. In our world, Lord, task of caring for the hungry and despairing. In the harvest we are sharing, God's will is done. For the harvest of the Spirit, thanks be to God. For the good we all inherit, thanks be to God. For the wonders that astound us, for the truths that still confound us, most of all that love has found us, thanks be to God. For our prayers of the people, we've got 4 different activities that are at different points around the church, and you're welcome through this time to participate in one or more of them, or just sit quietly if you want to. First of all, to this map on the world, these will be our prayers for the people of the world, particularly those parts of the world that would be impacted more by climate change. My suggestion here is to dip into your pocket and place a coin on the map for the places that you want to pray for, because we have to acknowledge that money does make a difference in these situations. Any coins on the map will collect up for Lent event, and if we can put our regular offering bowls down by the mat as well, then perhaps as you come past you could put your offering in. Looking around for someone to grab me some offering bowls. Yep. Back on this area here, we're doing prayers to care for creation. There's a whole bag there of dinosaurs. The idea here is just to add a dinosaur onto the table. Yes, you can do that. To create a scene that is just kind of as symbolising the concerns that we have about plant and animal extinctions. There is, in each spot, there will be a written prayer that if you want to use it to kind of spark your own prayers, you're welcome to. Up here at the communion table, we have some prayers of response around this thinking about how much do we need. So there's some paper there. The suggestion is to draw around your foot to cut out the footprint and write your prayer on it. The reminder that we need to tread lightly on the earth, you can pin it to the green material. Perhaps more with the children in mind, there is some Lego over here as well. How big a house do we need? There's some pictures of houses there from someone who's living with their family in 10 square metres to some of the more extravagant houses we've seen around us. And finally, drawing on the sort of Mary experience, there's some over here. Who can we touch through our prayers, or do we need to experience the touch of God in your life? There's some hand cream on there if you want to use it as a kind of embodiment of your prayer, you're welcome to. And Jay is also happy to float around that area and pray for anyone if as an individual you'd like some prayer. So maybe about 5 to 10 minutes, not a lot of time I'm afraid, to explore some prayers that way. And then I thought maybe if we gather back at the map at the end, bringing the prayers, the written prayers with us, and then we can share them together as a group. Haven't organised any music for this. I'd rather that, musicians, you'll feel free to be involved. And if, we've got some background noises, hearing the kids playing, that's good too. certainly had one comment about how our music has enhanced our prayers, so thank you. I wonder if we want to draw this prayer time together by sharing some of the written prayers. I'm wondering whether anyone who was involved with dinosaurs, 2 people would be willing to stick up their hands to read this for me. I see some of the younger people over by the dinosaurs. If you've got someone can read the, yes, someone who did a footprint who might like to help 2 people, to someone who did some hand cream, and this is our Lent event prayer, volunteer. Maybe if we start.
Lord God, creator of all things, you continually sustain the life of the universe and all that is within.
We thank you that you have called us to share in the work of caring for what you have made.
You have made us your partners and led us into the secrets and mysteries of your universe.
You have revealed to us the secrets hidden in your creation, and through the skills of scientists, physicists and engineers, you have taught us how to use them effectively.
You have placed us in a position of great responsibility within the animal kingdom.
Lord God, accept our thanks for this green and fertile planet and for the place you have given us within it.
Amen. And a version of the Lord's Prayer from the Philippines.
Our Father in heaven,
You want us as your children to build a new earth.
look upon the world with love and give us peace. Hallowed be your name.
O Lord, let no wrong be done in your name, no oppression or manipulation.
Look upon the world with love and give us your peace. Your kingdom come.
Not the reign of fear, of force, of money, or seeking peace through war.
Look upon us with mercy and give us peace with justice. Your will be done on earth as in heaven.
In this land of ours and in those sister lands which echo with gunfire and cries of fear.
Look upon the world with love and give us your peace. Give us this day our daily bread.
The bread of peace, Lord, to be able to sow our handfuls of rice, corn and beans and see them grow undisturbed, and to eat all together around the table as brothers and sisters.
Look upon the world and give us peace. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us.
Do not let our relationships be based on self-interest. Let us change laments for songs of life, clenched fists for outstretched hands, and the weeping of widows and orphans for the smiles of children.
Look upon the world with love and give us peace. Lead us not into temptation.
The temptation to conform, to do nothing, the temptation to not collaborate with you in the search for justice and peace.
Look upon the world with love and give us your peace. But deliver us from evil.
From behaving like Cain to our brothers and sisters, from believing ourselves lords of life and death, from being hungry for power and full of destructive intentions.
Look upon the world with love and give us your peace.
Amen. Let it be so, Lord, according to your will, your plan and dream.
Amen.
And our Lent event prayer, one of you, would you like to blow out a candle?
So as we blow the 5th candle out, somebody want to do that for us? Blow one of those candles out. Thank you, Dana. God, like viruses, are concerned with our individual needs, hopes and wants, destroy life and families. Yet in the face of the impossible, faithful people let go of self in order to breathe new life and to rebuild shattered families and ravaged lives into hopeful and real futures. As we have put this candle out, may the Christ light remind us how personal and how simple these solutions can be and how much difference we can make. Guide us by the light. Guide us by your Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
So we're going to sing Beauty for Brokenness. And I'm sure at some point, either after this song or during morning tea, the children would be happy to share the M&Ms around. Equal shares.
We go taking all of this with us to the world to let that perfume permeate. That was the word I was looking for. But know that we go with the blessing of Father, Son and Spirit. And thank you to Rachel for sharing. Amen.